Welcome back, everyone. Thank you so much for joining us again here on Board Shorts, your bite-sized guide to becoming a franchisee. Once again, I am joined in the booth, or rather, I'm not in the booth today, but I'm joined by another fantastic member of the franchise community who is supporting franchisees in their journey of becoming a self-employed business owner. This is my good friend, Innes. Now, Innes, rather than me introducing you, I'm going to let you introduce yourself. So tell the lovely people who you are.
No problem, Ben. Thanks very much for allowing me the opportunity to come on today. My name's Innes. I'm a member of the HSBC UK franchise team, Ben, and what our business is we're a specialist sector in the franchise world. We work within the wider corporate monster of HSBC UK commercial and corporate business, supporting, like I said, the franchise network. We've got over 200 brands that we work with, not all active, and we work with over 9,000 franchisees and £1 billion, £1 billion worth of funding into the UK sector. So we're fairly serious about what we do. We're a small niche team, fairly experienced. We've been doing it for over 35 years. So yeah, that's who I am. That's what I do.
Okay, so are you giving out free samples today, first of all? And do you get tired of people asking you that?
Absolutely. I do not have a bin bag of used £10 notes in the boot of my car, unfortunately. No.
Well, we'll end today's session there then and move on. No, that's of course not what we're here to talk about. So, Innes, the reason why, thank you so much for introduction. The reason why I wanted to drag you on today is because one of the common questions I get asked for people when they're going through the franchise process, that due diligence phase where they're finding out about franchising and whether it's a good fit for them, is how they're going to fund it. And businesses are complex and detailed, and there's lots of elements that people need to look into when they're going through that due diligence phase. But one that can often lead to a lot of confusion is how much money they can borrow, over what term, what that looks like. So I thought we'd just go through some basic questions about that funding position, if that's all right with you. So let's start with the obvious one. How much can people actually borrow if they're looking to join a network?
Great question. As I said at the very start, we partner with a large number of franchisors in the UK, Ben, and through collaboration and networking, regular meetings, we build our relationship with them. And in turn, what that does is it gives us the confidence and the data to discuss franchising with prospective franchise partners. We typically look to start at around 70-30%. That's a 70% bank funding and a 30% non-borrowed contribution from the client. These parameters will vary. There are some sectors and brands where we'll offer higher multiples, but we'll also consider lower multiples. And again, that's just perhaps a reflection of where that brand or franchisor is in their franchising journey. But that's a conversation that I would have along with my colleagues with any new opportunities that arrive. And the key thing for us is collaboration and relationship building with the likes of yourself and the other brands.
And those parameters that you work to, it's a bit like a mortgage, isn't it? So you're expecting someone to have a percentage of that purchase cost to put into the business, their skin in the game, so that when you're lending against the value of that business and they're going to start their franchise operation, it's not 100% funding from the bank. You expect them to have some capital in there.
Absolutely. And you used a great phrase there, skin in the game. My credit guys would love that. Yeah, absolutely. Listen, the bank will never 100% fund any new proposal. We always ask the client to put their money where their mouth is, Ben. And again, typically we're looking for around 30% from them.
Okay. Yeah. And at that stage, when someone's looking to, they've gone through that due diligence phase, they've talked to a franchisor that they feel is a good fit for them. What's the next step? Do they reach out to you directly, or does the franchisor introduce you to them? How does that normally work?
The referral process actually comes in a number of ways. The main one that we see would be an introduction from the brand themselves directly to the team, introducing the client, potentially a little bit of background on them. And then we would pick up with the client directly, again, typically via Zoom in the current world. And during that conversation, we would explain to them a little bit more about our business, our collaboration with the brand that they're interested in, what lending parameters are, and typically the information required to support any funding application. It's a very staged, step-by-step process. It's clear, concise, and the client will always get the opportunity to ask as many questions as they can. Because, listen, let's be honest, it's quite a daunting process.
Absolutely. Most definitely. I think for all franchisees that I speak to who are in that process, it's probably the most terrifying part. As soon as you're getting to the numbers on the screen, it starts to look quite scary. So what does that phase look like? Once they've made that first point of contact with you, either through the franchisor or direct, if it's coming in that channel, what happens next?
The information required to consider a formal funding application is absolutely key. And that's going to take up a huge part of the conversation that I have with them. Now, just to expand on that, what would HSBC typically require to consider a new funding proposal? Well, what we would always like to see is a business plan. And that shouldn't come as much as a surprise. But listen, business plans comes in all different shapes and sizes. What we're not looking for here, Ben, is something the size of the good old Argos catalogue, because that's going to put any reader off. Something factual, bullet points, covering the strengths, the weaknesses, the opportunities, the threats, the demographic of the brand, a little bit of history about the individual, a breakdown of the funding requirement, etc. And the majority of brands that we work with will be able to guide and support franchise partners with that via a templated document. What we'll also talk about is interest rates, because that's a huge question for any potential partner. How much are you going to charge me, Innes, etc. And as I always say to everybody, listen, are we the cheapest bank on the high street? Probably not. No, I'll put my hands up and say that. Are we the most expensive? Absolutely not. But listen, are we a dedicated franchise proposition who understands the brand, who understands the sector and can add value at the outset of the relationship and throughout the journey? Hey, listen, absolutely we can. Yeah.
That's the important bit, isn't it? That you're building a relationship with the bank, you're building a relationship with the franchisor. And I think it was actually you who once said to me in the past, it's like a three-legged stool. Those three legs then form the core of that business, and each one's just as important as the next.
Absolutely. And as the franchise partner goes on the journey, we want to come on that journey with them.
Okay, so when the franchisee has then put together a business plan with the help with the franchisor, what are the common mistakes you see? What things go wrong, or do they position incorrectly?
I just lack of information, Ben. We've got to support and endorse this plan and take it forward to our credit colleagues. Quite often we see missing financial information, outdated business plans as well, and lack of research is another huge one. We need the franchise partner to be able to demonstrate that they've done their homework, they've crunched their numbers, and they present a plan that's fit and purpose. Other simple mistakes we see is a lack of clarity on the loan purpose. It's not clearly explaining to us how these funds will be used, and it just makes it harder for us to assess any proposal. And the old adage, another key one, Ben, is as part of the bank's assessment, we'll always undertake a credit reference search more often than not on clients, and people who are partners who ignore maybe some credit history, where they've had problems in the past, we'll always find out. So we would always ask that people are as transparent as possible and disclose that within the plan. If there's been a problem in the past and we've fixed it, that's fine. That allows us to tell our credit colleagues what's happened and be able to justify it. But yeah, that's a number of common mistakes there.
Yeah. Would you say that the funding process that you go through is different for a greenfield to a resale? So just for the people listening, a greenfield is a turn of phrase that we use in the franchise community to mean a cold start business. So you're starting in an area at point zero and building your business from there. A resale, fairly self-explanatory, is where a franchisee is buying an existing franchisee's business and continuing to build. So are those two things different? Would you look at them differently?
Yeah, we would. The cold start, obviously, potentially a little bit more challenging because we have to build the business from day one. We're making a lot of assumptions with regards to what especially the initial financial performance is going to look like. A resale, it's a little bit more of a tried and tested model. We'd like to think we're buying something fairly successful, and that would be demonstrated with the information that we would require from the franchise partner. In this scenario, we've got a trading business, we've got financial accounts already available to us, we've got a valuation of a business as well, and we want to understand how that's been valued. But yeah, the concept is much the same, but slightly different.
And so I suppose the important thing here is making sure that the franchisee has gone through that due diligence phase, understood each aspect of what they're taking into business before they then bring that to you with the business plan.
Absolutely. And again, with resales, Ben, it's very, very important that we use professionals such as solicitors, lawyers to overview the purchase, assist with the due diligence, etc., which the bank would expect.
Absolutely. Okay, so one of the other lovely things you get to do that I don't is you actually get to assess franchisors as well. So you get to see the things about us that make us either good, bad, or ugly in the franchise world. So when you're looking at the different businesses that HSBC then become happy to lend to, what's a good franchise? What should a franchisee be looking out for? I'm not going to ask you to name anyone, don't worry. Just an idea of things that franchisee should be looking for when they're going through that process.
Yeah, I think reputation's got a lot to do with it. Just the good old Google search will indicate a huge amount of information with regards to that brand and performance, etc. Clearly, we should be looking at the track record, customer reviews, Ben. They're everywhere, aren't they? Trustpilot and etc. What's their standing within the industry? There's so many franchise industry papers that you can look at, and we've got Elite 100 awards coming up soon. That's a great reference base for anybody looking to join a system. Listen, a strong, recognisable brand is always a good sign. Could you go as far as reviewing the franchisor's financials when you're having that initial dialogue? Ask for some information on typical earnings. Are they realistic? Do they add up to what you require? Meet your lifestyle, etc.
Yeah, absolutely. I think those are all great points and ones that any good franchisor should be very aware of and be able to answer those questions. If someone comes and asks, where do you sit in that Elite 100 list? Where can I find that financial information? Can I speak to some franchisees to verify the support levels are as you have indicated? Okay, and probably worth pointing out as well to anyone listening that HSBC are always great at being impartial. So if you go to them and say, should I get this franchise or that franchise, they're never going to make a recommendation.
Absolutely. We cannot do that. We enjoy working with everybody in our system. But I guess going back to that previous point, Ben, and you made a really good point yourself, speak to existing franchisees. I think that's really, really important. But to expand on that, speak to franchisees who are at different stages of their journey. It's important to maybe speak to somebody who's in that initial 12-month period, but then maybe also speak to somebody who's coming up for a renewal period. Can you get, two different bits of opinion? But that was a really good point, yeah.
Yeah, renewal's a great one, actually. I think a good question to ask any franchisor is how many franchisees have gone through the renewal process? A great indication of how well the business is viewed by the franchisees. If they've had 100% renewal, that's a fantastic indication that the franchisees are being looked after.
We're doing something right, aren't we? Yeah.
Okay,
yeah.
So if you could give one tip, you could leave the wonderful listeners and viewers with one tip, what would it be?
Use as much support and guidance from professional people within the sector that you can. You physically cannot do this alone. The franchise world is a family. It's very small within the United Kingdom. Lean on as many people as you can to get the advice and support required to support you on your journey. And from a bank's point of view, make sure your business plan and financial forecasts are robust, fully vetted and endorsed by the brand, and you'll be very successful, I'm sure.
Good. Well, there's my soundbite that I need just for the end there. Beautiful. Innes, thank you so much for giving us 15 minutes of your time today. It's hugely appreciated. What we will do as well to anyone watching is put the links so you can reach out to the HSBC franchise team if you require funding for your franchise. They'd always be very happy to hear from you. So that just leaves me to say thank you very much again to Innes, and join us again soon for another episode of Board Shorts.